Next is the phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus is an essential nutrient found in the macromolecules of humans and other organisms, including DNA and ATP. Phosphorus is often the limiting nutrient or nutrients that is most scarce and thus limits growth in aquatic ecosystem. Most phosphorus in nature exists in the form of inorganic phosphate ion. It is found as phosphate salt in terrestrial rocks and ocean sediment. The phosphorus cycles is the movement of phosphorus in different chemical form from the surroundings to organism and then back to the surrounding. This phosphorus cycles is usually very slow as compared to other elemental cycles. The phosphorus cycle is endogenic. That means that no common stable gaseous form of phosphorus is available, and often it is a limiting factor in plant growth both in terrestrial and aquatic environment. So this figure shows the general flow of the phosphorus cycle. Basically, almost similar to the nitrogen cycle, the phosphorus cycle takes at and below ground level. Very little reaction occurs in the atmosphere. Phosphorus is often found in soil and rock as calcium phosphate, and weathering of rocks and sediment release phosphate. Then plants can bind phosphate into organic compounds, and when they absorb it from soil or water, and organic phosphate can move through the food web from producers to consumer and to the rest of the ecosystem. So plants can be eaten by animal and it will enter the food chain. And while other phosphate can wash into rivers and streams, you can see here it can be washed down into the rivers and streams where it dissolves, and then this phosphate eventually makes its way to the ocean where marine organism process and incorporated into biological compounds. And mineralization of biomass by microbial decay will return phosphate to the salt solution, from which it may precipitate as mineral matters. So it will then combine again in the sediment. Here are the flow diagram indicating the main process and main species or compound involved in the phosphorus cycle. So you have here, this is the insoluble inorganic phosphates that undergoes dissolution to prepare soluble inorganic phosphate. And then from here, it can be assimilated by organisms to produce biological phosphorus, which are used in our nucleic acid, ADP and ATP. And this, when organisms die or they produce waste, it will produce biological, organic and inorganic phosphate in sediment. And then it can reproduce the insoluble inorganic phosphate. So fertilizers and also xenobiotic organic phosphate can contribute to phosphate in the phosphorus cycle. The human impact of the phosphorus is the mining of large amount of phosphate rock to make inorganic fertilizers and detergents, reducing available phosphate in tropical forests by removing trees or clearing forests, whereby this will cause soil nutrient to be washed away without trees. Leaching of phosphate to aquatic systems, so runoff of animal waste, commercial fertilizer from farmland, municipal sewage discharge, and erosion. One of the significant causes of human impact to the environment is eutrophication. Most fertilizers used in agriculture contain both nitrogen and phosphorus, which may be carried to aquatic ecosystem in surface runoff. So here is an example of common fertilizer use. You will see here it is written NPK. So NPK stands for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. In this case, nitrogen is used in making protein for production of healthy foliage growth. Phosphorus is aids in strong root growth as well as flower development and larger seeds. So we use a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus in our fertilizer. Fertilizer, once it's used in our crops or in our plants, fertilizer carried in runoff may cause excessive growth of algae or algae overnourished or other microbes that were previously limited by nitrogen or phosphorus. And this phenomenon is called eutrophication. Nutrient can cause an increase in the production of phytoplankton growth. They consume oxygen to decompose and thus produce algae. Blooms crowd over other plant species and negatively impact wildlife population. The algae use large amount of oxygen to decompose by bacteria. Since they use large amount of oxygen, then other aquatic organisms reduce amount of oxygen. Some algae make wastewater taste or smell bad or produce toxic compound. So this image shows the NASA Earth Observatory image of an algal bloom that occurred off the Atlantic coast in the summer of 2015. So you can clearly see from the satellite image, the green here indicates that there is algal bloom or the formation of eutrophication.